Hello everyone. I warmly welcome you to the fourth lecture of the subject Managerial Communication. The topic for this lesson as well as the next lesson is effective business writing. So here we will talk or rather discuss about writing business documents in an effective manner. So you know what do you mean by the word effective? You may have heard the words effectiveness and efficiency in your first semester principles of management subject. So there, according to the famous management guru Peter F. Drucker, effectiveness refers to doing the right thing and efficiency refers to doing things right. So here we talk about doing the right thing. That is how you can prepare the right business document according to the business need. So that is all this week's session and the next session will be all about. So as you already know, I am Prabhashini Vijayavantha, Senior Lecturer attached to the Department of Human Resource Management, Faculty of Commerce and Management Studies, University of Kelaniya. So this is the session outline. This is what I am going to cover during this lecture. So first, we'll look at what is business writing or what sort of documents are required in business writing. We also refer to the same as business correspondence. So before we move on to specific formats of business documents, we will also discuss the general guidelines in effective business writing. So these general guidelines are applicable to any form of business writing. And then we will move on to specific types of business documents. The most two common forms of business correspondence are business letters, which is largely seen or used in public sector organizations, and the other one is emails. Emails are the most popular form of business communication in private sector organizations in Sri Lanka. As most of the Sri Lankan organizations in the public sector still follow the traditional bureaucratic approaches, they also use business letters. They often use them more than emails. And finally, we will look at the other forms of business correspondence in addition to business letters and emails. So before we discuss about different forms of business writing, I will emphasize you about the importance of writing skills. In terms of communication, there are 4 types of skills that you need to be very thorough. One is speaking. The other one is writing. The other one is reading. And the final one is listening. So out of these 4 types of very important skills in communication, here we discuss about writing skills. Why writing skills matter more than ever. So today, writing skills are a very important skill. writing skills matter or are considered important than ever before. Do you believe that? I'm sure you don't believe that, because we are in an era or a period where we use smartphones and other methods like short message systems. But still, this is some evidence. A survey of American corporations revealed that 2/3 of salaried employees have some writing responsibility. So this shows the importance of writing, irrespective of the job, whether it's in marketing, finance, sales, HR, accounting, finance, whichever. 2/3 of salaried employees have revealed in this survey that they have some form of writing responsibility to undertake. So this is in America. And also about 1/3 of them, however, do not meet the writing requirements for their positions. So imagine, even in an American organization, out of the employees who have some writing responsibility associated with their job, 1/3 do not meet the writing requirements for their jobs or positions. So that means they are not capable enough to fulfill the required writing work for their positions. So this is a very unfortunate or a pathetic situation. So that is why we have included a component on business writing for your subject managerial communication, so that you will not face this problem experienced by these American employees. So you should be able to have thorough writing skills at the end of these 2 lectures. We are continuing our discussion on writing skills. Businesses are crying out. They need to have people who write better. Gaston Caperton. So according to this quotation, businesses are crying out. That means businesses are worried. They are desperately looking for people. So in an environment where there is a limited number of job vacancies and there is quite a lot of people looking for jobs, still business organizations are desperately searching. Searching for what? Searching for people. What type of people? People who have better writing skills, because these organizations need to have people who write better. So this indicates the importance of writing skills in a working environment, irrespective of whether you do a marketing job, a sales job, an HR job, a finance job, whatever. One company president explained that many people climbing the corporate ladder are good. And also there is a very good news. Most of the people nowadays who are working in organizations are very well educated. Most of them have completed their school education and done at least a university degree, a diploma, or sometimes they have also done a master's and a PhD. So they are highly qualified academically. And also, as they have been engaging in a lot of extracurricular activities during their school days, they have a lot of skills. So this is a very good thing for organizations. That's why one company president had explained that many people who are climbing the corporate ladder, that is, who are going up in the organizational hierarchy, are good. But then it also creates a problem. When the employees are faced with the hard choice, that is, when they have to give a promotion, the promotion opportunities are limited. Then the board of management of the organizations, like the company president, etc., are faced with a hard choice, or they are facing a difficult decision. Why? Because all the people climbing the corporate ladder are good. They find it difficult to make a choice between the candidates. In that case, one of the key skills that they use as the deciding factor or the differentiator between different candidates is the writing ability. Writing ability is used as the deciding factor to give a promotion nowadays, because almost all the other skills among all the candidates are very similar. He said that sometimes writing is the only skill that separates a candidate from the competition. So that is what I said a little while ago. So writing skill is a very important skill, as it is the only skill that separates a candidate from the competition and identifies him as a unique candidate to be awarded with a job or a promotion. So that is why I emphasize again and again here that developing your writing skills is very important. You may be writing through a computer or a laptop, whatever. You may not be writing with a pen and a pencil in a paper, but still writing is writing. So you need to develop the skill of writing to remain unique in the corporate world. So then we will move on to discuss about the general guidelines in effective business writing. So these guidelines apply to all types of writing in business. General guidelines in effective business writing applies to writing letters, emails, memos, business reports, proposals, anything. So this should be formal. Any form of business writing has to be very formal and very professional. Irrespective of whether you pass this email message or letter to your best friend in the organization, still, since this is an official matter that you are writing in the letter or the email, you have to write it in a very formal and professional manner. Each message, irrespective of what it is communicating, comprises of 3 parts: opening, main message, and the closing or the ending. So each letter or email or memo has 3 parts or 3 sections. The opening or the initial parts of the document, the main message, which is the most important thing, and the professional or formal closing or ending of the document or letter or email. So this indicates that you can't simply mention only the main message. You have to also pay serious attention about the opening and the closing or the ending of the document. And then when you are including the main message, there may be several main messages within one document. In that case, how could you differentiate between different important messages? In the same letter or in the same email or in the same memo, the main message, so say there are 3 main messages. then you can include 3 paragraphs. Or even in one message, if there are a lot of details to be shared, you can categorize those details and include one topic per paragraph and divide the body of the document into separate paragraphs. So it would be one topic per paragraph. And remember, this is a very professional and formal business document. And you are not writing it in the form of literature. And also you should be always mindful that the person who is going through this is very busy and doesn't have a lot of time to read thoroughly and understand. Therefore, you have to avoid writing long sentences and paragraphs. You have to avoid writing long sentences and very lengthy paragraphs in a novel or a short story. This has to be very short. The total document or message has to be very short. And you can divide paragraphs, but these paragraphs should also not be lengthy. And also you should start writing short sentences, not long sentences. And another very important point in writing business documents is providing of information. When you are providing information, please remember that you should avoid giving incomplete information, because as people are very busy and as they read these documents in a rush, they might miss certain important points if you provide incomplete information. For an example, you cannot write an email like this. Dear staff members, we are having our next staff meeting on next Wednesday. Your participation for this meeting is very important. So assume today is Tuesday. The next Wednesday is tomorrow. But remember, the person who is writing the mail assumes that next Wednesday is the first week of May. So then some people might think it's tomorrow, that is Wednesday 29th April, while the other people might think it is Wednesday 6th May. Then there will be confusion because of the incomplete information included in the email. So then you have to avoid such incomplete information and give complete information. Certain things may be obvious. Still you have to mention it for clarity purposes. Say the email example that I mentioned before could be reworded like this. Dear staff members, our next department meeting will be held on next Wednesday, that is 29th April 2020 at 9 a.m. at the department boardroom. So then it is very clear and very specific, and there would be no confusion. And also, when you are writing messages, you should present the information in a very methodical manner. First, you need to take a separate sheet of paper and structure the information in maybe as points or bullet points or something like that. And then present the information in the business document in the correct order, so that it is easy for the respondent or the reader to comprehend. One may use the chronological order. What is the chronological order? That means you mention it in the sequence, like on let's say something like this. On 13th On 12th of March 2020, schools in Sri Lanka were closed due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Thereafter, universities were closed on the 14th of March 2020. Then the government gave a public holiday to all employees, all the people who are working on Monday 16th March 2020. Like that, you give it in a date sequence. That's called a chronological order. Or else you can arrange or present the information in the order of importance. You can mention the most important information first and the least important information last. So this presenting order of information has to be decided based on the preference of the writer and the nature of the message. And these guidelines are commonly applicable to any form of business writing, irrespective of whether it is a business letter, email, or memo. Some more general guidelines. Avoid contractions. When you are writing business documents, remember, as I mentioned before, they are very formal and professional. So you have to avoid contractions. Contractions are expressions such as I'm, isn't, like that. And also don't use spoken style. When the way we speak English and the way we write English is different. So don't use the spoken style. Always use the professional style. And then whenever you ask something, whenever you request the reader to take some form of action, maybe passing this email to another person, preparing a document, maybe arranging a vehicle, any form of action, when you request the reader, the other party who is receiving this letter or document to take some form of action, you have to request it by using the word please. Say please. And also you have to say thank you at the end. So assuming that the person will carry out the request that you made, and also for reading this email, you say thank you at the end. Sometimes if you have asked for some action to be taken, in the email or the letter, you may ask the reader, which you have asked the reader, then you may say thanking you in advance, which means the writer is thanking the other person, that is the receiver, before the receiver takes the action. Ask rather than order. As human beings, we all know that we don't like when other people give orders. Orders are given to people like slaves. But when it comes to a colleague, friend, a boss, or a subordinate, it is more professional and polite to ask or request rather than ordering. So when you are asking or requesting, it is very important to say please. When you ask rather than ordering, it is very important to say please. Then once you prepare the document, maybe the letter or the email or whatever, you have to review it again before you send it. First, you have to just type the letter or just type the email. or just type the memo and finish it off typing. And in about 5 minutes time, revisit the document and review it. Go through it again, read it from the top to bottom to check whether the information in the document is correct, whether you have given all the necessary information, and whether the grammar is correct, the spellings are correct. And then you can send the email or the letter. Because otherwise, sometimes you may have incorrectly mentioned a date, or you may have forgotten to mention the venue, or you may have forgotten to attach the attachment, or you may have forgotten to sign. So those kind of things may have happened. So therefore, you have to go through again the content and review it, so that you'll come across all the mistakes that has been done by you, and then you can correct it before sending it to the other person. Then thank the reader for his or her response. So as I mentioned previously, you may ask the other person to do something, and then in the letter or the email itself, thank the reader for his or her response by mentioning thanking you in advance. Some more general guidelines. As I mentioned earlier, you should not be using the spoken style. You should be giving a very formal approach to business writing. So because you're taking a formal approach to business writing, you cannot use informal language. So do not use informal language in any form of professional documents. As I mentioned it before, you may be sending it to your best friend. Still, don't write hi, hello, xiao, something like that. Hi, Saman. Hello, Saman, like that. Right? You have to say, dear Saman, like that. Do not use text message abbreviations. This is a very serious problem nowadays. This was not a problem long before, but now it has become a problem. Why? Because now with the use of phones, lot of people are used to texting through short message services, SMS, or most people are used to chat through Facebook Messenger and things like WhatsApp, Viber, etc. So there you don't type everything in detail. You use abbreviations, but those abbreviations are not appropriate for professional writing like emails, letters, memos, reports, etc. So do not use text message abbreviations. For an example, I hope I can see you soon. So this say and this you are both text message abbreviations. And also this one, see, your order is ready for you. So this YR can be read by one person as your, while the other person may read it as ear. So your order is ready for you. Then it doesn't make sense. Especially when you are writing to people like customers, you have to be very professional. So do not use text message abbreviations. Then do not use slang and emoticons. Do not use slang. What do you mean by slang? Slang refers to unprofessional language for words like guy. A guy here can help. I am pissed off. Words like pissed. So those things are slang. and they are usually used in spoken language. Not even in professional spoken language, but in like personal spoken language. So you can't use such language in business writing. And also, we are not supposed to use emoticons like sad faces, winking, angry faces, all that. Provide contact information. As this is a form of written document, sometimes the other party, the reader, may need certain clarifications. Even though you have mentioned all the necessary information in the document, there may be a need where the reader may need to contact the writer back. So if you are sending an email, obviously the reader has the writer's email address, so they can reply back. Anyway, when you are writing an email or letter or whatever, you may have to mention the contact information of the writer, the name, the designation, the email address, and maybe the mobile number or the telephone number. Once you provide the contact information, it is very easy for the other party to get back to you. And above all, irrespective of whatever the type of communication, remember to be polite. You have to be polite throughout your communication so that the other person would feel that politeness while reading the message. So with that, we concluded the general guidelines on any form of business writing. So now, as I mentioned at the outset, we are moving on to discuss about specific types of business correspondence. Here, I am emphasizing about writing business letters. So, I have included a quiz exercise in your LMS about business letter writing. So, you are kindly requested to attempt that exercise. Let's see what I am going to talk about business letter writing. First of all, what are business letters? Or what is a business letter? A business letter is a letter written in formal language. So as I mentioned before, a business letter is a letter written in formal language in a very professional manner. So which means you do not use the spoken style of language, you do not use slang, and you do not use emoticons, and you are very polite. A business letter is often used when writing from one business organization to another. The most widely used form of business letters are the letters written and sent from one business organization to another business organization. Also, not only that, a business letter is often used for correspondence between organizations and their customers or other external parties. A business letter is used for correspondence or communication between organizations and their customers. Let's say a customer has made a complaint about a particular product, and then the organization has to send a letter apologizing for that low quality product. So there you would write a business letter to the customer, or maybe to other external parties like employees, or maybe suppliers, the government, or the special interest groups based around the organization, like that. So then the exercise 1. So this is the exercise or activity which I was referring to you earlier. So I have included this exercise 1 as a separate quiz in your LMS. You are kindly requested to attempt that so that it would give you a lot of practice and it will make it easy for you at the exam. Fill in the blanks of the following sentences using your understanding on writing business letters. So this is a very basic exercise. You have to fill in the blanks of the sentences using your understanding or knowledge on writing business letters. I'm sure you have been studying about writing business letters from your school age. You may have written business letters while you were in grade 9, grade 10 and grade 11. And also you discussed or learned about writing business letters for general English at your A levels. So you're very thorough about writing business letters. So here we are going to refresh your knowledge by filling the blanks in this exercise. So you are kindly requested to attempt this exercise by filling the blanks. The answers to the exercise mentioned previously are included here. So as I mentioned before, if you are listening to this lecture, pause it here or stop it here and go back to the exercise in the LMS and attempt it first. And then cross-check your answers with the answers mentioned here. The address of when you are writing a business letter, the first thing is that you mention the address of the sender, that is the writer. So the address of the sender or the person who is writing is mentioned or included at the top on the left. So if we assume this is the A4 sheet that we are using, the address of the writer is mentioned at the top on the left of the A4 sheet. Then you mention the name and address of the addressee or the recipient. It is at the top on the left below the date. So after mentioning the sender's address here, next you mention the name and address. Earlier you mentioned only the sender's address. Here you mention the name and address both of the addressee. Who is the addressee? The recipient or reader of the letter. So it is at the top on the left itself. Like the address of the sender, the name and address of the addressee is also on the left. So both are on the left at the top, but the name and address of the addressee is below the date. The address of the sender is above the date. So the date is at the top. The date of writing the letter is also at the top of the A4 sheet on the left below the sender's address. So the date is in between the address of the sender and the name and address of the addressee. Then you mention the salutation. Right after mentioning the address, you mention the salutation. What do you mean by the salutation? Dear Mr. Sam, something like that. Dear President, dear Vice Chancellor, something like that. Business letters should always begin with dear, unless you use the salutations to whom it may concern. So business letters should always begin with dear. As I mentioned earlier, irrespective of whether you write it to your best friend at work, still it has to start with dear. You can't just say, hi Saman. It has to be dear Saman because it gives a very professional look. Sometimes, say, now the university is issuing you a letter. Maybe a letter about your character or maybe about your academic performance, which you may take to different employers. So in that case, if we address the letter to one particular employer, you can only take it for one interview. So then, to enable you to take it and use it for different occasions, we mention it to whom it may concern. So to whoever you show the letter, it is addressed. Then, after the dear, you include the subject heading of the letter. The subject heading of the letter, that is the heading or the subject. It is the subject heading mentions what the letter is about. Say for an example, requesting for a sponsorship for the HR 3Ds. So that the person who takes the letter immediately knows that it is about requesting a sponsorship. And then after mentioning the subject heading, you may start writing the main message. So this main message comes as different paragraphs. See here in this example, there are 3 paragraphs. The paragraphs start at the left margin. The latest method, which you call the block method of writing letters, requires you to start the paragraphs at the left margin of the document without indenting it. You should not be indenting the first part of the first word of the paragraph. You should start it at the left margin. As you are starting at the left margin, you have to properly space the layout. So you have to leave a line between each paragraph. And also, if the letter ends like in half the page, you can just increase the space a little and increase the font size a little and thereby properly space the layout of the letter so that the letter spreads throughout the A4 sheet. But you should make sure that it doesn't jump into another document. Sometimes you may single space your letter, or you may use 1.15 spacing, or you may use 1.5 spacing, but definitely not double spacing. You can either left align or justify your letter. As mentioned before, avoid using slang, abbreviations, acronyms, emojis, or text speech. Use a very plain font like Times New Roman, Arial, Tahoma, something like that, rather than using fonts like Comic Sans or any other fashionable fonts. Then use white bond paper of decent weight. So in Sri Lanka, what we mostly use is A4 paper. Then this talks about the acceptable closing to use. Include sincerely, sincerely yours, best regards, thank you for your consideration, respectfully, and very respectfully. So you can use either of these closings based on your type of the letter. And remember, though the closing in this example is right aligned, according to our format, we will be left aligning the closing as well. We would mention it here. Then some more guidelines. There should be a space between the paragraphs. So as I mentioned to you previously, as we are following the block format of writing letters, so you have to left align the paragraphs in the letter. So when you are left aligning the paragraphs, there should be a space between different paragraphs for the reader to separately identify the paragraphs. Then you move on to the closing of the letter. So as mentioned there before, you may use something like yours faithfully, sincerely, sincerely yours, respectfully, something like that. And then place your signature. The signature of the sender is placed below yours. So then to place the signature, you may either write the letter in hand with a pen on paper, or you may type the letter in your laptop computer using Microsoft Word. And then once you finish typing, you print the letter and sign it. Or else sometimes now people use their e-signatures. And after you put your signature, you have to be very careful that you have to mention your name and the title. Why? Because if the reader doesn't know the signature, they can't recognize the signature of the other person, then it would be difficult for the reader to find out who wrote this letter. So therefore, after the signature, the name and the title of the sender should be mentioned. The name and the title. So when you are mentioning the name, you can't just include your first name. You have to mention your full name. Say DMHK Bandara, or else say Saman Bandara, something like that. The name and the title. Title is your designation or your position. Saman Bandara, Head of HR. Saman Bandara, Employee Relations Manager. You should mention that at the bottom and below the signature. Also remember, you are not using any commas in this type of letters. So there is no punctuation in the addresses. Can you remember that we mentioned the sender's address and the recipient's address at the top? So there you should not mention or include the commas. There is no punctuation in the addresses or after dear or after yours faithfully or sincerely. So that was about writing business letters. Here further I elaborate on writing the business letters. Business letters layout. The previous exercise was also about the business letters layout. Here I explain the same thing with examples. So as we discussed before, we begin by mentioning the sender's address. Remember, here we do not mention the sender's name. We only mention the sender's address. Why? Because we mention the sender's name at the bottom after the signature in the closing. So, in most of the organizational communications, we use letterheads. So, in that case, the letterhead includes the name of the company, the address of the company, the telephone numbers, and also the website. In that case, do you still need to mention the sender's address? Not really. You can just start the letter with the recipient's address. So if you are asked at the exam, how should you start the letter when you are writing in a letterhead and a normal sheet of paper, you should be able to identify the difference. And then next you move on to the recipient's name and address, or the addressee's name and address. So in between the sender's address and the recipient's name and address, you include the date of writing the letter. Mentioning the date is very important because the respondent sometimes replies saying, in response to your letter dated blah blah blah. So therefore, it's very important to mention the date. There are two formats that people use in mentioning the date. The UK format is 6 December 2012 and the US format is June 12, 2012. So, based on the language that you are using in the computer, say if you are using Microsoft Word and your language is English United States and your organization normally uses US English, you may use this format of putting the date. But if your organization is using UK English and in Word also you have selected English UK, then you may use this format of putting the date. Then you include the salutation, that is, Dear Mr. Jones, something like that. Then after a line, a space, you may mention the subject line, that is the heading of the letter. So this heading or the subject line will mention you what this letter is about. This template gives you an example of the letters. So it starts with your street address, city and zip code if letterhead is not used. Then you leave a space and mention the date. Here they have followed the US style of putting the date. And then you leave a space and then you mention the recipient's name and address. Name, position and address of person to whom the letter is being written. Then you leave a space and then you put the greeting or the salutation. Name followed by a colon. This colon is actually not required. Then space. Then the subject and thereafter the body of the letter. Paragraphs not indented. So as you are not indenting the paragraphs, you have to leave a space between the paragraphs. And after the paragraphs are over, you leave another space and you close the letter by mentioning something like sincerely. Then keep a little more space and then you put the signature in the space provided. And then you type your name and your position. And then you leave a space, and if there are any attachments, you can mention it below. So after the subject title, you put the opening of the letter. I am writing to inform you about the new arrangements that will be made to ensure your safety at the university due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Something like that. Or if you are replying to a letter sent by somebody previously, thank you for your letter of 13th November. Then you mention the main part, body of the letter or the email, and then the closing. So before you end the letter, you may say, I look forward to receive a favorable response from you. Something like that. Or maybe your cooperation in the above regard is greatly appreciated. And then you say thank you or thanking you in advance. And then you end the letter with an appropriate ending like yours sincerely or yours faithfully. And then you put your signature. Name in printed letters. Job title or position. In case if the writer did not write the letter. Say in organizations, most of the vice presidents, CEOs, general managers, managing directors are all very busy. So they do not have time to type letters. So what they do is they get their secretary to take down the idea and then to draft and type the letter. And once they type the letter, they take a printout and show it to their boss, maybe the CEO. Then the CEO may go through the letter and edit it as necessary and then give it back to the typist to get the final printout. And then the typist, once the typist gets the final printout, the CEO would sign it. Then remember, if you need this letter again, sometimes they may need to find out who typed it because then it would be saved in their computer for lazy retrieval. So then writer's initials, therefore the typist's initials should be mentioned at the bottom of the letter. If the writer did not type the letter, like say the secretary typed it on behalf of the vice president. And then what are enclosures? What is carbon copy and what is Xerox copy? Sometimes we send letters attaching certain other documents. Then in the letter itself, we mention what are the documents that have been attached or stapled to the letter and sent in the same envelope. So those are like in emails we call them attachments. In letters we call them usually enclosures. So we refer to enclosures in short using ENCL. So in the letter, they put the word ENCL and then they list out the attachments. So then the reader can go through the attachments. And in case if one of the enclosed attachments, if one of the enclosures are missed, the reader can find it out and inform it to the writer. Sometimes you write a letter to the Vice Chancellor with a carbon copy to the Chief Security Officer of the university. So in that case, you send them a carbon copy. That's a CC. So what you do is you put CC like that and mention the names of the people to whom you have sent this letter. Send copies of this letter. Earlier, as there were no computers, the copies were written by keeping a carbon paper. So that is why still we use the word CC or carbon copy. Though nowadays what we do is we take another printout and give it to the other person. Sometimes what we do is we take a photocopy of the letter and then send it to somebody else. So then you mention XC. X refers to photocopy. Why? Earlier, photocopies were referred to as Xerox copies. Why? Because in the early days, there were only Xerox brand photocopy machines. So people used to call the photocopies Xerox copies. Enclosure notation. Items included inside the envelope besides the letter, as I mentioned before. Carbon copy notation. If copies of the letter are distributed, the phrase copies to or the abbreviation CC is typed at the left margin below the identification notation or enclosure notation. So what if you are using a letterhead? If you are using a letterhead like this, different companies use different formats for letterheads. That's their own choice. There is no standard format for a letterhead. So then they include the name of the business or the name of the organization, Unilever Sri Lanka Limited, or the name of the individual. Say if you are getting a letter from the president, it would mention like Gotabaya Rajapaksa Sri Lanka Janadipati, something like that. So that is the name of the individual. Then logo or motto. Say some companies use their logo or the motto, like for Ceylon Bank they may mention the bank with a heart. And then the address. Here in the address they mention the address of the corporate head office. So in case if you want some communication to be sent to your branch office, after your name and the designation, you may mention the address of the branch and also the phone number. So under the phone number, the letterhead includes the phone number of the company corporate head office reception. So if you want the other party to directly contact you, you may mention the direct line of your direct line or maybe your mobile number. And also the company corporate email. So since the letterhead includes the company corporate email, if you want the other person to send you an email, you may include your personal email address in the body of the email, body of the letter. And the letterhead of the computer may have the website, the URL for the company website. Why all this information in the letterhead? Because in addition to the communication, companies use this as a mode of marketing or branding the company. Next, you have another exercise. How do you put the salutation in writing letters to the following parties? So earlier we discussed about putting the salutation in the letters. So where do we include the salutation? Below the recipient's name and address and above the subject. So how do you put the salutation in writing letters to the following parties? I have included this exercise also as a separate quiz in your LMS. So you are kindly requested to attempt this before referring to this video lecture, so that you can test your knowledge and this memory will be useful for you again at the exam. First thing, when you are writing a letter to a company, to a man or a male if you do not know his name. So you are writing the letter to the chairman of a company. So you are writing a letter to the chairman of John Keel's Holdings. You know that he's the chairman and he's a male, but you don't know exactly what is his name. To a woman if you do not know her name. To a married or unmarried man. to a married or unmarried woman, to a married woman, to an unmarried woman, to a friend or someone you know well. Let's see how you can greet them or how to put the salutation. So you may do the exercise and then you will be able to discover the answers. Then how do you put the endings? How do you end a letter? Sometimes you may use the word best wishes, or you may use the word yours faithfully, or you may use the word yours sincerely. So you use the word best wishes to someone you know very well. Yours faithfully when you are not writing to a named person. Say you are writing to Dear Vice Chancellor or Dear Sir, Dear Madam. Then you are not writing to a particular named person. Then you end the letter with yours faithfully. Then yours sincerely to a named person. Dear Professor Disanayak. So it is a named person. Then you end the letter with yours sincerely. And also remember at the end of the letter to put your long signature and not your short signature. So here it matches the salutations and the endings. Dear Sir or Madam. So this expression, Dear Sir or Madam, is used when you don't know the name of the person. You know that it's a male, but you don't know the name. Then you mention Dear Sir. You know it's a female, but you don't know the name. Then you use Dear Madam. And since it is written without a name, you end it with yours faithfully. Here, Dear Miss Jackson. So here, you know it's a female and you know the name, Miss Jackson. So irrespective of whether they are married or not, you can use the expression MS. So dear Miss Jackson, nowadays, whether we know they are married or not, or whether we don't know, whatever, people use the expression MS when you are writing a letter to a female. So dear Miss Jackson. And you end it with yours sincerely because you are writing it to a named person. And if you are writing the letter to a very closely known person or one of your friends, you may write Dear Mark, Dear Ben, Dear Saman, Dear Sunil. And then you can finish the letter with best wishes or best regards. Usually, this is used in emails rather than letters. So next, we will look at the different types of letters that you may have to write in an organization. Types of letters. Letter of application. Sometimes some organizations may request you to send a letter of application. Without sending a CV, they want you to mention about your personal details in the letter itself because they want only a brief description about yourself. So then it's a letter of application. Or sometimes you may have to often write a covering letter. You may have to write a covering letter attached to your CV. So it will come along with your CV. The difference between the letter of application and the covering letter is that the letter of application does not have a CV attached, but the covering letter has a CV attached. So you may be asked at the exam, what is the difference between a letter of application and a covering letter to the CV? then you should be able to explain very carefully. Then a letter of inquiry. Maybe as HR people, you may have to write or type or prepare inquiry letters for your employees. Letter of complaint. You may have to write a letter of complaint to one of your suppliers or service providers, complaining about a product that they have supplied. Letter of apology. Say you may have to write a letter of apology to a customer or an employee for a mistake that has been done by the side of the company. Letters communicating good news like appointment letters, promotion letters, etc. And then letters communicating bad news like say rejection letters, transfer letters, demotion letters, or maybe if you are sacking an employee, you may have to write a letter to inform that his service is no longer required by the company. Or letters requesting action. You may have to write a letter to the secretary requesting to book the meeting room. So it's a letter requesting action, or maybe a letter giving an order, or letter placing an order. So with that, we conclude our discussion about writing business letters. So since this is a video lecture, we are unable to write a business letter in the classroom itself. But there are several exercises that I have included in the LMS. So you are kindly requested again to attempt to those exercises. And once we meet in the physical classroom, we will be writing a formal letter in the class based on or using this knowledge. Next, we'll move on to discuss about the next popular form of communication. What is that? Writing emails. So as I mentioned previously, emails are the most popular form of communication in private sector organizations. Let's see how to write an email. Again, I have included an exercise in the LMS. So as you have already written emails, you know very well about writing emails. So please answer the questions in the LMS about emails. So these are the questions. I have included them in the LMS. When do you put the recipient's email address to the email? While you are writing an email, once you write the email, you have to send it to somebody. So under the tab 2, you have to put the recipient's email address. At what point do you put that? At the beginning of writing the email, in the middle of writing the email, or at the end of writing the email? We usually put it at the end. First you type the body of the email, then you put the subject of the email, then you go through the email again. As I mentioned before, you have to review the content and do the corrections, editing, everything, and make sure that you do not use spoken language, slang or emoticons, and you need to make sure that you are polite, and you need to check whether you have included all the necessary attachments, and finally you put the recipient's email address just before clicking send. Why? Why do you have to do it at the very end? Because otherwise, in case if you mistakenly send out the email, it will go as an incomplete email, which would be not nice if it goes to your boss or the chairman of the company. What is CC in an email and what is BCC in an email? So you know that already. CC refers to carbon copy. So carbon copy refers to the other people in addition to the recipient whose email address is mentioned under the to section. In the CC section, you mention the people to whom you have copied. Say for an example, you may write an email to the subject lecturer with copies to the head of the department and the dean of the faculty. So that the person who is supposed to read and take action is the person who is having his email address in the to section. The people in the CC section are included for their information. And then what is BCC? Blind carbon copy, which means the addresses of the email to whom you have included in the BCC section that other people can't read or see or view. So they are silent observers. In professional communications, you usually don't use BCC. Then in emails, you put the subject. Similarly, like in letters. So what's the purpose of the subject? What's the purpose of including the subject in an email or a letter? So that immediately, as soon as the reader sees the email, they know what this email is all about. And they can decide whether they are going to respond, open it now or later. And also, in case if they want to refer back to this email or trace this email, they can search by the subject. Do you copy parts of the original message when you reply? When you receive an email, sometimes you may have to reply to the recipient, reply to the sender. So how do you do that? Do you open a new email? No. You click the reply button and reply to the email. So when you do it like that, by clicking the reply button, you do not have to copy parts of the original message sent by the person because the original message already appears at the bottom of the email. And finally, why is it important to mention what you are attaching? So when we write an email, we would mention attached herewith I am sending the handout for the managerial communication lecture on writing business reports. So why am I mentioning that what I am attaching in the body of the email? So that when you read the email, you know that one thing, this email has an attachment. Then you will not miss the attachment. You will definitely check the attachment. Secondly, say I have mentioned attached herewith, but as the sender, I have forgotten to attach the handout. Then you know that I wanted to attach a handout, but I have forgotten. And then you can ask me or request me or inform me. And also, it is important to mention what the attachment is about. Whether the attachment is about writing business reports or whether it is about presentation skills, like that. So that if the sender has attached the wrong attachment, the reader knows it and reader can inform the writer that he or she has included the wrong attachment. So that is about writing emails. Again, if you have any questions or clarifications about writing emails and letters, what you can do is you can either drop an email message or an email to me asking for clarifications. Finally, we'll move on to the final form of business correspondence, which is memos. What is a memo? You have studied about writing memos, I think, for general English for your A-levels. Anyway, let's refresh your knowledge. So, a memo, you use the word memo in short. In detail, you call it memorandum. So, a memorandum or a memo is a short message from one person to another in the same business or organization. A memorandum or a memo is a short message. Usually you don't write long memos. It is either one page or one A4 sheet or 3/4 of an A4 sheet. From one person to another, from the GM Finance to GM HR, or maybe from the GM Finance to the Board of Directors in the same business or organization. So remember, not like emails and letters, memos are only circulated within one organization or maybe its branches, not with external parties or external organizations. And because it is within the organization, we do not have salutations, addresses, all that. Memos have no salutation line. So you do not mention dear, because in the to section of the memo, we have mentioned to whom this memo should go. So again, we should not put a salutation or greeting. Dear someone, something like that you don't put. And no signature area at the end. So you do not sign at the end. You only mention your initials. However, now memos are not used much. Why? Because emails have replaced memos because of its technological advantages. So nowadays in organizations we rarely use memos. We use memos but not often. Why? Because emails are much easier than memos. So emails have replaced memos because of its technological advantages. We can send easily within one single mouse click rather than printing a memo. So anyway, it's better for you to know the format of a memo. So this example is a sample memo. The standard fields in a memo include the to all staff, from company executive, maybe the chairman, something like that. And then the subject, employee commute options survey. So that is the subject. So subject indicates the reader what the memo is all about. And then the date of writing the memo. So here we don't include sender's address, recipient's address, etc. Then you also mention the words memorandum or memo at the top. And you do not sign a memo, you simply put the initials of the writer. So with that, we conclude our discussion, the first part of business or effective business writing. Under the first lesson for effective business writing, I covered business correspondence, where we discussed about writing letters, emails and memos. So if I am to summarize what we discussed under this effective writing lecture, I discussed about how you can develop the skills in memo and letter writing using Microsoft Word. And also I enabled you, or I will explain you how to develop effective business reports in my next lecture on effective writing. And also we discussed about effectively drafting emails. So with that, I conclude my first lecture on effective business writing. And since we are not doing this lecture in a physical classroom, so if you have any questions or clarifications, you can email them to me so that I can clarify them. So thank you very much for your time and listening to this lecture. Thank you.